Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the Cloud Computing for the C-Suite show with Brad Nelson and internationally recognised and world's #1 industry expert and thought leader David Linthicum. This show is sponsored by Nelson Hilliard, cloud computing recruitment specialists, placing great people in cloud, IoT, fintech and AI. This week we're excited to have as our special guest Ron Batra. Ron is a business-focused technologist with extensive experience in transformative technologies and modern architectures. Hi Dave and Ron, a warm welcome to you both. It's exciting to have you both on the C-Suite show this week.
Yeah, I'm really looking at Ron's perspective on this stuff. He's a leader in cloud computing, but also IoT, edge computing, fog computing. Really kind of leading thought in the space. And so it's great to have him on the show. Ron, how you doing?
Very well. Thank you, David. Thank you, Brad. I look forward to the show. My recent years, I have been sitting at the intersection of how edge computing, IoT, and cloud all come together. And I try to cover it right from the business lens as well as the technology lens, and trying to have decision makers understood how the whole value proposition hangs together. I look forward to our conversation.
That's great, guys. It really is a real pleasure to have you both on the show this week. And this week we're talking about an article which Dave actually wrote for InfoWorld, which is talking about hybrid cloud and the fact that the bursting didn't actually go anywhere. So, I mean, Dave, you say that in most of the C-suites are getting frustrated with buzzwords that sort of go nowhere. What other hyped concepts are going to frustrate the C-levels in the next few years? I mean, that should go to you, I guess, first, Dave, really?
Yeah, and that's good. That's a good point because, we have to, at the time I thought cloud bursting was a little bit far-fetched. And I think that it is, was kind of outed over time based on the capabilities just weren't there to make things happen. So in other words, we couldn't create analogs between private and public clouds, or it made sense to switch the workloads when, loading came up. That just wasn't practical. So we do that in public clouds primarily now. But yeah, I mean, things like some of the container stuff I see is a bit overblown. So we have a tendency to, especially enterprises that are into containers, they'll throw that at every problem out there. And I think that's not the way forward. I think the way forward is understanding your requirements and figure out where containers may be a fit, but also most of the workloads and problem domains out there, they're not going to be a fit. So I think we have to have some practical relationship with these concepts as they come forward, and we have to be a little bit more open and honest with the C-suites out there, else we're going to find that we lose credibility in their eyes. We keep coming up as an industry now, not as a person, with different buzzwords and concepts which we think are going to save us from the last dumb buzzwords and concepts that we implemented. Ultimately, it's going to be a death spiral in terms of our credibility and in terms of our ability to add value to the business. So, Ron, what are your thoughts on that?
I concur, David, that the buzzwords tend to enchant the C-suite and are used as a selling tool, and then often we enter the value of the value proposition is not there, and we end up going downhill. I believe that the technologies which are at the forefront today, all of them have immense promise. But to your point, it's not one size fits all. For example, containers, microservices, and function as a service are all interlinked. But not every application is candidate for function as a service, or not every application is candidate for microservices. There are still some applications that, believe it or not, can function pretty well as monolithic applications. Now, extending the similar thought to IoT, the market forecasts are huge, and people realize a lot of value that is going to happen. But the value is not occurring from just one system talking to another. It's how one system enhances the efficiency and makes life better and efficient. It takes 10 clicks out of maybe 25 clicks that are one item. Maybe something that took 20 steps is now a 2-step item. That's where the real efficiency jumps out at you.
So going forward, should we? This is kind of a trade-off for me because the times that I've pushed back on buzzwords, I get a lot of criticism. Even this article I wrote this week, people were kind of up in arms with the fact they said that private clouds aren't much of a thing anymore, which I stand behind based on the data that we see and the problem domains that are out there. But the reality is that we have to become practical in how we're going to apply this technology in the context of the business. And we have a tendency to chase, and we talked about this a lot on this show with myself and Brad, chase the shiny objects. And we need to put the shiny objects in perspective. I think the downside is, though, if we're out there leading thought in the space, people expect us to kind of chase the shiny objects and, lead thought toward, IoT, blockchain, component-based computing, container-based computing, all the things that are kind of, popping up these days, deep learning and machine learning and things like that. And they'll push back on your ability, you're pushing back, and you kind of not be heard, and your credibility will be questioned, if you don't go along with the crowd. And I think that's kind of a, funny thing, if funny kind of concept that's going on. So in other words, it's, and I'm interested in the way you, because the reality is I just kind of say what's on my mind, and I kind of let the chips fall where they may. So if I believe in it, I'm passionate about what my conclusions are, right, then I'll go ahead and take the slings and arrows, but because eventually I'll be proven right. But of course, I want to remember the argument that we had, 2 years prior. But that's kind of the way I approach it. How do you approach it?
Well, my approach is very similar to yours, but what I try to do is I try to break down the pinch of realism into a phased roadmap. So while my gut instinct might say this thing is never going to fly, I try to temper that as a thought leader by saying this thing will fly, but this is where it's going to become real, and this is where it's going to become hyper real. So I try to take every technology trend that the industry expects us to solve for, and I try to at least give a next 2 to 4 to 5 year perspective. And I try to put it in plain English as to what does that mean from a business perspective, from an adoption perspective, and from a market penetration perspective. And so I do that. And then what I try to also do, David, is I try to connect the dots between different trends. So, for example, if you think of each of these as parallel trends that are not intersecting anywhere, that's probably not, may not happen. All these trends will intersect somewhere. The simple use case I bring is the hybrid cloud and the cloud bursting use case, right? I think as technologists, all of us knew that bursting and is not a trivial phenomena. We also knew that multi-cloud architecture is a complex phenomena. We also know how much work goes into set up a hyperscaler environment with all the automation that the cloud providers do in their availability zones. So the problem is this, that when a C-suite goes to a conference or an event or listens to a salesperson, you and I can say that, but there's always an external pressure that another C-suite person might get entranced by somebody who's sold a vision to that C-suite. And when these two C-suite persons talk, they're going to say, I was told my shiny object is going to be better than your shiny object. So we as thought leaders, I believe, have our job cut out to explain the trends and to break it out into a time horizon. I simply have learned the hard way that if I shoot down things and sell exactly what's on my mind, sometimes that's not the best way, because it could end up as people lose faith in you. They're like, what do you mean? Everybody's saying, you're the lone wolf who's saying no. Well, you still have to say no, but you have to say it in a very elegant manner, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And Brad, I'd like to get your perspective as well as you're placing people into technical jobs. Is this feel like you're kind of chasing buzzwords that the C-suites are telling you? Is this like you're chasing buzzwords that the hiring managers are telling you, or does this feel like it's to a productive end that people are kind of putting the latest and greatest buzzwords on the requirements to go off and fill positions? Do you feel like you're filling a position for a very short period of time?
Yeah, I mean, you and I have spoken several times about shiny objects and how it impacts the workflow and C-suites, decision making. I think can be real issues around people that are trying to implement something. They really have no idea of what the actual outcome is they're trying to do, and what they're actually focusing more on is making sure that they can be in the bar with their friends talking about the shiny object they're about to implement into their business or organization, whatever processes they're trying to initiate. I think it all comes down to the outputs, really, realistically, and there are a lot of buzzwords out there. Is it for me to tell them they're not the right buzzwords? I don't really want to hurt someone's ego. I don't know where they've heard that new buzzword from, and that is usually the source of the problem. Someone somewhere's made a deal or sold a product or sold a concept. For me to jump in and then say, no, I don't think so, that's a buzzword I don't want anything to be a part of, would be ludicrous in this fast-moving IT world. I need to understand from my point of view of facilitating the correct person into that role of their newly considered buzzword of process would be, what's the output you need? And then to work out what's the longevity of that buzzword within the organisation. Can you give me an example of how that's going to, the term of that contract and what the outputs are ultimately? And equally, the person, why have you gone down this route of having this buzzword, and what does the person that sold that to you, what can they demonstrate the longevity of it as well? So can they give you case examples of how they've used that within your organisation? But I can only be objective. I can't in any which way put myself in the position of being that buffer between their embracing of the shiny object to me working from a human resources point of view.
Yeah, and I think that's good. I think it's really kind of, we're at a point where I think that the C-suites are on to the whole hype thing. And, since they're paying for it, the CFOs and the CEOs and the COOs, they're asking a lot of very educated questions that I'm getting now that I did 10 years ago or 20 years ago in terms of the value of certain things. And I think, the way you do it is really get in there and never sell technology, really for technology's sake. I think people have a tendency to get in there and, speak cloud and speak IoT and, really trying to push new concepts that everybody's talking about, down the throats of the C-levels who are in the organization. I think they're going to push back on that. So you have to listen to the requirements, listen to what's going on, and then back the appropriate technologies into the solution, which is something I think we're forgetting. I think we did that well 20 years ago. I just think now everybody's so enamored with what's next and what's going on that they don't necessarily put the time and energy in understanding what the problems they're trying to solve. What do you think, Ron?
I agree completely. So I think the issue is this, David and Brad, that the last 10 years, the way technologies have matured and have accelerated, we have not seen that adoption and acceleration in most other life cycles, if you will. I mean, let's look back at how long the mainframe was there, and let's look like how long client server remained before people realized it couldn't scale well, and then in the Java-based and web-based applications came into the mix, right? And that lasted for a long time. So when you look at it, took 6 to 7 years. I think cloud computing was incepted somewhere in 2008, 2007. Amazon, probably, who invented cloud computing, was struggling on how to scale up their infrastructure. And they launched AWS, I think, in 2008 or 7, somewhere, if I'm maybe 6. But since then, the last 10 years, I think what is different from before other tech booms is that the speed of advancement is very, very fast. We have not seen such acceleration in our lifetimes, where everything appears to be headed really fast. I think the question is this, that the business outcome of what everything is moving so fast, is this business outcome real? Is that a 20-year horizon or a 4-year horizon or 2-year horizon? I think that's, if we nail that, we're doing a big value to the business.
That's a great summary, actually, there, Ron. I think that is, it really does, it's certainly where I come from with regards to projects and what the timeline is for, the embracing of technology and where they see it for the long term. David, do you have any final thoughts for the coming to the close of the show?
Yeah, I think that this is going to be an ongoing battle. I mean, the ability to kind of, figure out what technology is going to add value, what technologies are not, and trying to guess beyond the hype. And it's something I think we have to come to grips with going forward, or else the C-levels and the boards of directors, people I deal with on a daily basis, are going to constantly have issues with IT.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I think as well, because they've been through, just sort of closing off the show, but they've been through a baptism by fire, because I think they have been sort of the technical phrase hoodwinked by people, trying to sell technologies. I think they've got to a point now where, you've been fooled once, you can't be fooled twice. Well, maybe you can, but you certainly won't be fooled 3 times when you budget for technologies that aren't going to offer the outcome, and certainly don't have the longevity for the long-term plan in the way the technology accelerates at such a rate. So guys, thanks so much for being part of the C-Suite show this week. It's been very interesting at all. Ron, thanks for being on the show this week. It's been great.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, David. Appreciate the invitation.
David, thanks again for being a part of the C-Suite show. It's awesome.
It's always a pleasure, and it's great having Ron on the show.
Yeah, it really is. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. We hope you enjoyed watching the C-Suite show this week. It was very interesting. Always about the shiny objects and what to avoid and what you shouldn't avoid. So you can get Ron on Twitter, which is at Ron Batra. David's on Twitter as well, which is at David Linthicum. And I'm on Twitter also, which is at Nelson_Hilliard. Thanks again for watching. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks again for watching.